And of course, a big day it is today, given what is expected. Finance Minister Tito Mboweni expected to make assurances to investors on Wednesday, when the most important thing is to do and present a practical plan of action on how to save South Africa. So let's cross now to our economics desk anchor, Arabile Gumede, who is in Cape Town. Arabile, once more, good morning to you, and do give us more on what can be expected today.
But even though you know the money...
Yeah, good morning, Sakina. Look, it certainly has been quite interesting of late in the run-up to this medium-term budget policy statement. Yesterday, we saw unemployment figures come out, the worst in 11 years, and the worst ever has become the worsterest ever, if you can call it that, really. So that unemployment figure, 29.1%, it just makes his job, well, as known as it was before, but also a little bit more difficult. Then, of course, you had the Eskom saga and the situation there. What plan of action comes forth now with regards to the funding side and the debt side of Eskom? Certainly going to be a key question. We also then have, of course, the economic growth plan and the paper that the finance minister released in August. What happens to that? And the final revised version of that is set to also be brought out today. So we'll hopefully get a little bit more word on that. But for now, however, let's chat to Christy Viljoen, who's an economist at PwC, and he joins us this morning. Christy, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it. It's a budget, or a mini budget, shall we say, where not much can be done to perhaps invigorate hope of getting more revenue.
Yes, definitely. Look, the finance minister can do very little in terms of revenue today. He can make some good ideas, good suggestions, but the revenue is very much linked to the health of the economy. So what I'm looking for is on the spending side. We've been outspending ourselves for too long. That's why our debt has been going up. So for me, the big, strong message would be if he can get commitments and numbers through that will result in real spending reductions, that will be a vote of confidence that I'm thinking the South Africans and the rating agencies are really looking for.
If you were to put perhaps a prediction on the debt to GDP number, I mean, we've had predictions all the way up to 60% and beyond, and those were the scary figures. That was when the ratings agency said, look, perhaps we're going to have to downgrade you. And of course, we're looking at Moody's this time around and saying, please don't chop us any further. If you were to put a prediction on that number?
We're going to stay close to 60. There's very little that he can do to balance the numbers unless he makes significant cuts. And that's the difficult part. There's always cuts you can make, but there's always stakeholders that will push back to you. If he wants to reduce the staff payroll in the public sector, the labor unions will push back. If he wants to roll back infrastructure, there's going to be other government departments pushing back on that. So I don't think he's going to be able to do that much in bringing down the debt number. The reality is our ratings are looking quite bad. Moody's will give us an opinion on Friday again, and they've obviously got the last investment grade rating. They've been very, very good to South Africa so far in keeping our rating at investment grade. But I think it's come to a point where they can only wait so long before there is action. And we've got good plans. We heard the Eskom plan yesterday. We're going to see the economic policy update today and the next budget or sort of the plan for the next 3 years. So we've got enough plans, but they also need to be convinced that we're going to be able to implement them. If we take the Eskom plan, for example, it's been 12 to 18 months since we've really known that we need this kind of plan. So we've got a plan on the table now, 18 months down the line, and now it's time for action. And in South Africa, we're often quite happy to do plans, but action is the one that's most often lacking.
In lacking that action, we find ourselves sitting in a situation where perhaps for the last 5 years, we've almost done nothing really to help ourselves. Growth, as you said, is the cutting of or the expenditure and the situation with revenue is really a function of the growth scenario. We're not expected to get anywhere near 1% even for this year, and we're bound to see a revision as well from government, perhaps overly optimistic still nonetheless. Do you see us perhaps now finally saying, let's bite the bitter pill now and actually get some action done?
Well, it's the trade-off between the short term and the long term. We've been playing the short-term game for too long, and we've seen it in our weak economic growth numbers. Past 5 years, economic growth has been below population growth. That's why we're seeing this high unemployment rate. We're just not seeing people getting jobs. So we as South Africa now need to think about 5 and 10 years ahead, because at the moment we're just thinking about 2019, 2020. If you want to think about South Africa as a healthy economy, growing, creating jobs, reducing inequality in 5 or 10 years' time, biting the bullet is really necessary now. You're going to anger some stakeholders, you're going to make some people unhappy, but that is the issue with long-term planning. You have to make some short-term sacrifices, and if you think of the president, he's still got a long time in office that he can be the president. He needs to think long-term. So biting the bullet, exactly what Tito Mboweni needs to do, and he needs to be able to be sure that he's got the support of the presidency and the cabinet in doing that. Otherwise, this budget will again be a good plan, if it is, without being able to be implemented.
Yeah. I'm going to just ask you then for perhaps your one big point that you hope Tito Mboweni will address. You have spoken about cutting and spending. How much, where and what?
Well, we know that a few months ago he asked the government departments to make cuts to their planned expenditure from next year onwards, 5%, then 6%, then 7% the years thereafter. So for me, the big sign would be if he's able to get that through, it means that he's got the support, at least theoretically or on paper, from these government departments to get the spending in order. So that would be for me a key point. If he's able to get that commitment from them, it'll show that he's got the ability and the support of the government to get these things done. If not, we will unfortunately be hanging around waiting for budget in February again, hoping for more good news that might not be able to come through.
Christy, appreciate the time. Thank you so much. We'll continue to catch up with you as well throughout the day. Christy Filyoun, the economist at PwC, as we continue to unpack this medium-term budget policy statement. 2 o'clock is, of course, when the finance minister is set to take the podium and perhaps share his thoughts on Eskom, the plan ahead, exactly where South Africa goes to from here, and whether we get that growth figure we need way beyond 1%.